go beg on the streets. A stranger would be more likely to help you than I am. The shocking true story of how the golden child destroyed his own family, stole his brother's wife and baby, then died in a hail of bullets on the front lawn. Oh, honey. Let me tell you about the most scandalous thing that's happened in our quiet little neighborhood. I'm Mrs. Mel, and I've been living on Maple Street for 37 years now. I've seen families come and go, watched children grow up, and witnessed more drama than a soap opera. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what happened to poor Marcus Thompson. Let me start from the beginning, because this story is like an onion, layers upon layers of family dysfunction that'll make you cry. Marcus Thompson lived 3 houses down from me in that charming blue colonial with the white shutters. Sweet boy, always kept to himself, worked hard, minded his own business. But his family? Lord have mercy, they were something else entirely. I've been watching this family for years, you understand. When you're retired and spend most of your time tending to your garden, you notice things. The Thompson parents, Harold and Patricia, they had 2 sons, Marcus and his younger brother Derek. Now Derek, that boy was what they call the golden child. Everything Derek did was perfect. Everything Marcus did was overlooked. I remember when Marcus graduated valedictorian from high school. Did his parents throw him a party? No siree. But when Derek barely scraped by and got accepted to community college on academic probation, they threw a neighborhood block party. I was invited, naturally. Harold grilled burgers and Patricia made her famous potato salad. The whole time, Marcus sat in the corner looking like someone had died. But the real kicker came when Marcus got that full scholarship to State University for engineering. Full ride, honey. Do you know how hard that is to get? I was so proud of that boy. I baked him a congratulations cake myself and walked it right over to their house. When I knocked on the door, Patricia answered with flour all over her apron. Oh, Mrs. Mel, how lovely. We're just preparing for Derek's celebration party. I was confused. Derek's party? But isn't Marcus the one who got the scholarship? Patricia's face went all funny then. Well, yes, but we don't want Derek to feel left out. He's been having such a hard time lately. That's when I heard Marcus from inside the house, his voice cracking with emotion. You threw Derek a party instead of me? For my achievement. Harold's booming voice followed. Marcus, stop being so selfish. Your brother needs our support right now. You should be lifting him up, not tearing him down. I stood there on that porch with my congratulations cake, watching through the screen door as Marcus's face crumbled. That poor boy just grabbed his acceptance letter and stormed upstairs. I heard his bedroom door slam so hard it rattled the windows. That very night, I saw Marcus loading boxes into his beat-up Honda Civic. It was nearly midnight, and I was up with insomnia, sipping chamomile tea by my kitchen window. The boy was moving out, and his parents didn't even bother to come outside. Not once. For years after that, it was like Marcus had never existed in that household. Derek still lived at home well into his 20s, and Harold and Patricia doted on him like he was still their precious little baby. Meanwhile, Marcus put himself through college, got his engineering degree, and started working for a big tech company downtown. I kept tabs on him through social media. Yes, I'm 72 and on Facebook, don't judge me, and that boy was thriving. He bought himself a nice townhouse in the suburbs, got promoted several times, and seemed to be living his best life. But you could tell from his posts that he was lonely. Always pictures of him at restaurants by himself, at movies alone, traveling solo. It broke my heart, truly it did. Then, about 2 years ago, something shifted. I noticed Derek had started posting on Facebook about missing his big brother and family is everything. Real sentimental stuff that had me rolling my eyes so hard they nearly fell out of my head. This was the same Derek who used to steal Marcus's birthday presents and claim them as his own. But Marcus, bless his heart, he fell for it. Before I knew it, there were posts about family dinners and reunions. Harold and Patricia were suddenly so proud of their successful son Marcus, sharing his achievements like they'd been supportive all along. It made me sick to my stomach. That's when Marcus introduced them to his new wife, Isabella. Beautiful girl, worked as a dental hygienist, seemed sweet enough. I met her at the grocery store once. Marcus had brought her to visit the old neighborhood. She was polite, complimented my petunias, asked about my late husband. But there was something about her eyes that I didn't trust. They were calculating, like she was sizing everything up. "Your neighborhood is so charming, Mrs. Mell," she said, but she wasn't looking at the houses. She was looking at the cars and driveways, the landscaping, the obvious signs of money. Marcus and Isabella got married in a small ceremony downtown. From what I could see on Facebook, it was lovely. She looked stunning in her dress, and Marcus looked happier than I'd ever seen him. Harold, Patricia, and Derek were all there, playing the part of the loving family. But I started noticing things. Derek was commenting on all of Isabella's photos. Not just the ones with Marcus, but her solo shots, her girls' night posts, everything. And his comments were, well, let's just say they were more complimentary than a brother-in-law should be. "Looking gorgeous as always, Bella. Marcus is one lucky guy. Smiling face with heart eyes, wish I could find someone as beautiful as you." At first, I thought maybe I was reading too much into it. But then Derek started showing up at Marcus and Isabella's house more and more frequently. I knew this because Marcus would post about surprise visits from the family, with photos of Derek lounging on their couch, Derek helping with yard work, Derek staying for dinner. Marcus seemed genuinely happy about reconnecting with his brother. The poor fool had no idea what was brewing right under his nose. Last spring, Marcus posted the most adorable announcement about Isabella being pregnant. The photo was one of those trendy ones with tiny baby shoes and a sonogram picture. Marcus looked absolutely radiant with joy. The comments were flooding in with congratulations, but I noticed Derek's comment right at the top, "Going to be the best uncle ever. Can't wait to spoil this little one." Face-blowing kiss, something about that kiss emoji didn't sit right with me. And sure enough, over the following weeks, Derek's visits became even more frequent. I could see Marcus's house from my kitchen window, and Derek's beat-up pickup truck was there almost every day. Then I started noticing something peculiar during my evening walks with my little terrier, Buster. Derek would be on Isabella's porch late at night, long after Marcus should have been home from work. Sometimes they'd be sitting real close together on the porch swing, talking in hushed tones. When they'd see me walking by, they'd suddenly spring apart like teenagers caught necking. The explosion happened on a Tuesday evening in November. I was making my famous beef stew when I heard shouting coming from Marcus's house. Not just regular argument shouting, but the kind of devastated, heartbroken wailing that makes your soul hurt. I couldn't help myself. I crept to my front window with the lights off and watched the whole thing unfold. Marcus came storming out of the house, clutching what looked like a cell phone, with Isabella chasing after him in her bathrobe. Her belly was showing by then, probably about 6 months along. "Marcus, please. Let me explain." She was crying, but Marcus just kept walking toward his car. That's when Derek's truck pulled up. Perfect timing, almost like he'd been waiting for this moment. Derek got out, and instead of going to his brother, he went straight to Isabella and put his arms around her. Right there on the front lawn for the whole neighborhood to see. Marcus saw it too. The poor man just stood there for a moment, keys in his hand, staring at his wife in his brother's arms. Then he got in his car and drove off into the night. I found out later from my neighbor Janet, who works at the courthouse, that Marcus had discovered text messages between Isabella and Derek. Apparently, they'd been carrying on since shortly after the wedding, and the baby wasn't Marcus's at all. They'd been planning to string Marcus along until after the birth, then tell him the truth, divorce him, and live off the child support payments. Can you imagine the cruelty? The sheer, calculated evil of it all? What happened next was even worse than the affair itself. When word got out about the divorce, Harold and Patricia Thompson sided with Derek and Isabella. Can you believe that? Their own son, the one they'd neglected and mistreated his whole life, gets betrayed by his wife and brother, and they still chose Derek. I saw Harold at the hardware store a few weeks later, and I couldn't help myself. "Harold Thompson, you should be ashamed of yourself," I said right there in front of the paint chips display. "That boy Marcus has been through enough without his own parents turning on him." Harold just puffed up like an angry rooster. "Mrs. Mell, you don't know the whole story. Marcus has always been difficult. Isabella told us all about his controlling behavior, how he made her quit her job, his terrible temper tantrums. Harold Thompson, I've known Marcus since he was in diapers, and that boy doesn't have a mean bone in his body. But he just walked away, shaking his head like I was the one being unreasonable. The divorce was messy, honey. Real messy. Somehow, with Harold and Patricia backing up Isabella's lies about Marcus being abusive and controlling, she walked away with a huge settlement, alimony payments, and Marcus's beloved Mustang. The only thing Marcus got to keep was his house, and even that was a fight. Meanwhile, Derek and Isabella moved in with Harold and Patricia, using the settlement money to help them buy a bigger house to accommodate the coming baby. They all played house together like one big happy family, while Marcus was left picking up the pieces of his shattered life. Marcus threw himself into work after the divorce. I'd see him leaving earlier and earlier each morning, coming home later and later each night. The poor man looked like he'd aged 10 years in 6 months. But you know what? His hard work paid off. About 2 months ago, Marcus posted on Facebook about getting a major promotion. New job title, significant raise, company car, the works. He treated himself to dinner at that fancy steakhouse downtown and posted a picture of himself celebrating. He looked good, honey. Healthier than he'd been in months, genuinely smiling for the first time since the divorce. But apparently, Harold and Patricia were watching his social media too. Within days of that promotion post, Patricia was calling Marcus nonstop. When he didn't answer, she started showing up at his office. I heard about this from my friend Linda, whose daughter works as a receptionist at Marcus's company. Linda said Patricia caused such a scene in the lobby that security almost had to escort her out. Apparently, Derek had lost his job. Shocker, I know, and between his unemployment, the baby expenses, and supporting 4 adults on retirement income and alimony payments, the Thompson clan was struggling financially. They had the audacity to ask Marcus for money. Marcus eventually agreed to visit them, probably just to get Patricia to stop harassing him at work. I saw him park outside their new house that evening, and let me tell you, I positioned myself strategically in my garden with my watering can to witness whatever was about to unfold. Marcus was only inside for about 20 minutes before he came storming out. But as he reached his car, the whole family followed him outside. Harold, Patricia, Derek, and even Isabella holding the baby, Derek's baby, mind you, all standing there in the rain pleading with Marcus. I could hear every word from my garden. Please, Marcus, Patricia was sobbing. We're family. You have to help us. Derek, swallowing his pride, actually got down on his knees in the muddy driveway. Brother, I know I messed up, but we're desperate. The baby needs formula diapers. Marcus just stood there for the longest time, keys in his hand, rain soaking through his shirt. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was so cold it gave me chills. You want money from me? After everything you've done? Go beg on the streets. A stranger would be more likely to help you than I am. Then he got in his car and drove away, leaving them all standing there in the pouring rain. Marcus held firm on his decision not to help them, and honey, I was proud of him for finally standing up for himself. But this family wasn't going to give up that easily. Isabella, in a move that shocked even cynical old me, decided to take Marcus back to court demanding higher alimony payments based on his promotion. The audacity. The woman cheated on him, lied about the paternity of her child, took half his assets, and she wanted more? But this time, Marcus was ready to fight. And let me tell you, when that man decided to go to war, he went scorched earth. I watched him coming and going at all hours, meeting with lawyers, gathering evidence. He reached out to old friends, cousins, anyone who could testify about his character and his family's treatment of him over the years. He even asked me to write a statement about what I'd witnessed over the decades of living next to the Thompsons. You bet I did. I wrote 3 pages detailing every slight, every cruel comment, every time they chose Derek over Marcus. I was thorough, honey. Real thorough. The court hearing was on a Thursday, and let me tell you, Marcus came prepared. He had character witnesses, documentation of the affair, proof that Isabella had lied about his behavior during their marriage. He exposed every lie, every manipulation, every cruel thing his family had done to him. I wasn't there, but my friend Janet works in the courthouse, and she told me it was like watching a master class in legal warfare. Marcus's lawyer presented such a compelling case that not only did they deny Isabella's request for increased alimony, they terminated her existing payments entirely. Isabella apparently broke down crying right there in the courtroom. Harold and Patricia looked like they'd been hit by a truck. And Derek? Derek had to be restrained by courthouse security when he tried to lunge at Marcus. Marcus walked out of that courthouse a free man, no longer tied to any of them financially or emotionally. But the story doesn't end there, oh no. Because when desperate people have nothing left to lose, they do desperate things. That very evening, as Marcus was driving home from his victory, he found his entire family waiting on his doorstep. Harold, Patricia, Derek, Isabella, and the baby all camped out on his front porch like some kind of twisted intervention. I was pruning my roses, okay, fine, I was spying, when Marcus pulled into his driveway. The confrontation that followed was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Harold launched into a speech about family loyalty and responsibility. Patricia wailed about grandparents' rights and blood being thicker than water. Isabella begged him to think about the baby's future, conveniently forgetting that it wasn't even his child. But Derek? Derek completely lost his mind. He grabbed Marcus by the shirt collar and started screaming about how Marcus was just a jealous loser who couldn't stand that everyone preferred Derek. How Marcus had always been the problem child, the difficult one, the one who tore the family apart. You were never good enough. Derek screamed, rain streaming down his face. Not for our parents, not for Isabella, not for anyone. That's why she chose me over you. Marcus just stood there, calm as could be, letting Derek rage and rant. When Derek was finally finished, Marcus smiled, actually smiled, and said, "You're absolutely right, Derek. I am doing this for revenge. And there's nothing you can do about it." That's when Derek snapped completely. He swung at Marcus, but Harold managed to pull him back just in time. Marcus calmly told them all to leave his property or he'd call the police, and eventually they did. After that confrontation, things got quiet for a while. Too quiet. I didn't see any of the Thompsons around the neighborhood, and Marcus seemed to be getting on with his life. He was dating someone new, a lovely woman named Sarah who worked as a teacher. They seemed happy together from what I could see on social media. But behind the scenes, the Thompson family was falling apart spectacularly. Derek, unable to find steady work and drowning in shame and anger, started drinking heavily. I heard from Janet that he'd been arrested twice for drunk and disorderly conduct. Harold's health began declining rapidly from the stress. He ended up in the hospital with chest pains 3 times that winter. Patricia developed what looked like a nervous breakdown, calling Marcus at all hours, leaving rambling, desperate voicemails begging him to forgive them and help them. Marcus had to change his phone number twice. But the worst part? Isabella's baby, little Emma, was suffering because of all this chaos. Derek resented the child because she represented his failure. He was supposed to be her father, but he was too consumed with bitterness and alcohol to care for her properly. I started seeing Patricia at the grocery store with Emma, and that poor baby looked thin and fussy. Patricia, trying to care for an infant at her age while dealing with her husband's health problems and her son's alcoholism, was clearly overwhelmed. The final catastrophe happened on a Tuesday night in March. I was watching the evening news when I heard sirens wailing down our street. Multiple police cars, an ambulance, and a fire truck all converged on the Thompson house. I threw on my coat and hurried outside with half the neighborhood to see what was happening. What I witnessed will haunt me for the rest of my days. Derek, in a drunken rage, had gotten into a screaming match with Isabella about money. When she threatened to leave and take Emma with her, Derek completely lost control. He started throwing things, breaking furniture, terrorizing his own child with his violent outburst. Isabella managed to call 911, but not before Derek put his fist through a window and sliced his arm badly. There was blood everywhere, on the walls, the furniture, even on little Emma's blanket. The paramedics rushed Derek to the hospital while police took statements from Isabella and the neighbors. Harold had another chest episode from the stress and had to be taken to the hospital too. Patricia just sat in the ambulance, holding Emma and rocking back and forth, muttering about how this was all Marcus's fault. Derek survived his injuries, but he was charged with domestic violence, destruction of property, and child endangerment. The judge sentenced him to anger management classes, community service, and a restraining order preventing him from going near Isabella and Emma. Isabella, finally seeing Derek for what he truly was, took Emma and moved back in with her own parents in another state. She wanted nothing more to do with any of the Thompsons. Harold's health continued to deteriorate under the stress. The doctors said all the family drama had exacerbated his heart condition. He spent his final months in and out of the hospital, sometimes calling Marcus's name in his delirium, but Marcus never came. Patricia, left alone with Derek, who was now court-ordered to stay sober and attend therapy, tried one last time to reach out to Marcus. She wrote him a letter. I saw her putting it in his mailbox myself, explaining how sorry she was, how they'd lost everything, how Harold was dying and just wanted to see his son one more time. Marcus never responded. Harold Thompson died on a gray April morning, alone except for Patricia and a Derek who was too drunk to understand what was happening. The funeral was small, just a handful of neighbors and some distant relatives. Marcus didn't attend. I saw him that day, dressed in his work clothes, tending to his garden like it was any other day. When the funeral procession drove past his house on the way to the cemetery, he didn't even look up from his roses. Patricia tried to approach him at the grocery store a few weeks later. I was there getting ingredients for my famous lemon bars when I saw her shuffling up to Marcus in the produce section. She looked like she'd aged 20 years, gray, hollow-eyed, wearing clothes that hung loose on her shrinking frame. Marcus, please, she whispered, reaching out to touch his arm. Your father loved you. He talked about you every day before he died. Can't we try to heal this family? Marcus turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was colder than a January morning. I don't have a family, he said quietly. I have a mother who chose her golden child over me my entire life, and now she's facing the consequences of that choice. Patricia started crying right there in the produce section, but Marcus just walked away. Now here's where the story takes its most tragic turn, and honey, I almost can't bear to tell it. Derek, consumed by guilt, rage, and alcoholism, decided that if he couldn't have Marcus's forgiveness, he'd have his revenge. He started stalking Marcus, following him to work, parking outside his house at night, making threatening phone calls. Marcus got a restraining order, but Derek was past caring about legal consequences. He'd lost everything, his brother's respect, his child, his father, his future, and he blamed Marcus for all of it. On a warm evening in June, Derek showed up at Marcus's house with a gun. I was watering my evening primroses when I saw Derek's truck pull up. Something about the way he sat in the cab for a long time, just staring at Marcus's house, made my blood run cold. When he finally got out, I could see the metal glinting in his hand. I called 911 immediately, but Derek was already pounding on Marcus's door. Marcus, he screamed. You destroyed everything. Our family, our lives, everything. It's all your fault. Marcus must have seen Derek through the window because he didn't open the door. Smart boy. But Derek was beyond reason by then. You think you're so much better than me? Derek screamed, waving the gun around. You think you won? I'll show you what winning looks like. What happened next unfolded like a nightmare in slow motion. Derek, realizing Marcus wasn't going to come outside, started shooting at the windows. Glass shattered, neighbors screamed, people ran for cover. Marcus, trapped inside his own home, called 911 and hid in his basement while Derek raged outside, putting bullets through his front door, his car, his beautiful rose garden. The police arrived within minutes, but Derek was past the point of surrender. When they ordered him to drop the weapon, he turned the gun on them instead. The shootout lasted less than 30 seconds, but those 30 seconds destroyed what was left of the Thompson family forever. Derek died right there on Marcus's front lawn, shot down by police while trying to murder his own brother. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Derek, the golden child who'd been given everything, ended his life with nothing while trying to destroy the brother he'd always envied. Marcus survived physically, but the trauma of that night changed him forever. He sold his house immediately, couldn't bear to live where his brother had died trying to kill him. He moved across the country, started a new job, changed his name legally. Patricia, having now lost both her husband and her golden child, was left completely alone. The state took her house to pay for Derek's legal fees and funeral expenses. Last I heard, she was living in a nursing home, paid for by Medicaid, still muttering about how none of this would have happened if Marcus had just helped them when they asked. Isabella never brought Emma back for Derek's funeral. She'd changed their names and moved to another state, wanting nothing to do with the toxic legacy of the Thompson family. So there you have it, honey, the most tragic, twisted family drama I've ever witnessed in my 72 years on this earth. A story of favoritism, betrayal, revenge, and, ultimately, destruction. Marcus got his revenge, all right. But at what cost? His entire family is gone, dead, estranged, or destroyed. He's alone in the world now, just like he always felt growing up. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks it was worth it. If, in those quiet moments when he's starting over in his new life, he remembers that little boy who just wanted his parents to love him as much as they loved his brother. Does he regret not forgiving them? Does he wish he'd been the bigger person? But then I remember Derek with that gun, remember the years of cruelty and neglect, remember Isabella's calculating betrayal, and I think maybe Marcus did what he had to do. Maybe some families are too broken to be saved. Maybe some wounds are too deep to heal. All I know is that karma is real, honey. It might take years, even decades, but eventually everyone gets what they deserve. Harold and Patricia Thompson spent 30 years choosing Derek over Marcus, and in the end, Derek destroyed everything they cared about, including himself. As for Marcus? Well, I hope he finds peace somewhere out there in his new life. He certainly paid a high enough price for his freedom. But I'll tell you one thing, I still tend my garden every evening, and I still keep my eyes open for the dramas unfolding in my neighbors' lives. Because, honey, as long as there are families, there will be secrets. And as long as there are secrets, there will be stories to tell. And Mrs. Mel will be here to tell them.